Sometimes I feel like I'm just some kind of black hole or something. You know, it's this thing in outer space. It's like it sucks everything towards it and destroys it. And somehow I've just been scared, you know? I've just been scared that it would take you too.
Hey everybody, Stranger Things Season 2 is finally here, and we've got a lot more to talk about. Before I get started, I just want to remind you to check out my Stranger Things Season 2 review on planetcalvin.com. Now this will be a two-part video, which will present two variations of the same basic theory. The first possibility is pretty reasonable, at least when it's compared to the second possibility, which is a little more bizarre. This video will only cover the first possibility, so stay tuned for part 2, which I will briefly tease at the end of the video. Now this video is going to be kind of long, so let's get to it. If you had to personify a brain tumor, if you had to label a brain tumor with personality traits, what traits would you give it? Maybe malignant or malicious? Maybe infectious or vile? Maybe even evil. Pretty much anything that could describe an invading presence taking over an area that was previously happy and healthy. But in any normal circumstance, there is no reason to give a brain tumor personality traits, because it's not self-aware. It's just an irregular growth. But how might a brain tumor's growth differ inside a powerful telepathic brain like Eleven's? What would it do with all that conquered brain space and all the untapped psionic power that came with it? I think that Eleven could actually have a brain tumor, which is literally feeding on half of her power. And because Eleven's brain is so powerful already, this brain tumor could be producing massive psionic side effects without Eleven even realizing it. And I think a tumor like this could lead to the creation of the Mind Flayer. The upside-down hive mind itself could be broadcasting from inside Eleven's own mind. Now, why do I think this? We know that the Mind Flayer has both telepathy and telekinesis, the same two powers that Eleven has. In 1 year's time, Eleven's powers have increased. She can now access the void without needing a deprivation tank. She also seems to maintain more of her energy after extensive use of her powers. What if the Mind Flayer's powers have grown right along with Eleven's, allowing it to actually manifest itself in Season 2? Another similarity I noticed between Eleven and the Mind Flayer is that neither of them know their true home.
Is your new home?
Home. She always believed that you'd come home one day. Home? Yeah, home.
I think this is your home.
Home.
Yes. Home.
The Mind Flayer.
What the hell is that?
It's a monster from an unknown dimension. It's so ancient that it doesn't even know its true home.
We know that Eleven is only 13 years old. She's not ancient, but it's not like the Mind Flayer from D&D is the perfect comparison for the actual shadow monster in Stranger Things. It's just the best analogy the kids could find for understanding it. I just thought that this parallel was too similar to be meaningless, especially after they spent all of Season 2 showing Eleven struggling to find her home. The fact that the Mind Flayer doesn't know its true home could also hint to the fact that it doesn't know it's currently inside Eleven's brain. And if it doesn't know that, then neither would Eleven. Now, another big clue for me in Season 2 is just how often Mr. Clark talks about the human brain.
The human brain. I know, it doesn't look like much. A little gross even, right? But consider this. There are 100 billion cells inside of this miracle of evolution, all working as one.
But what I really like about this first quote from Mr. Clark is that it very much compares the human brain to a hive mind, which Mike even acknowledges later.
It's like what Mr. Clark taught us, the hive mind. And this is the thing that controls everything. It's the brain.
Like the Mind Flayer.
And Mr. Clark's phrasing of all working as one sticks out in my mind when I consider the brain tumor theory, because it allows for the possibility that the cells within Eleven's brain may not be working as one, resulting in a growing resistance of cells within an otherwise healthy mass of brain cells. Now, the cell resistance I'm talking about is cancer. Cells in general have a normal life cycle. They grow, divide, and die to make way for new cells. And while these cells are not sentient, they are essentially programmed to fulfill a particular destiny. In fact, the end of this life cycle is called programmed cell death, or apoptosis. But when it comes to cancer cells, they have many different ways of blocking the regular programmed cell death, allowing them to continue to divide and spread when they should identify themselves as harmful and self-terminate. The easiest way to understand this change in cellular behavior is that a mutation causes the cells to essentially go rogue, turning to the dark side, if you will. And over time, these cells no longer respond to many of the gene signals that normally control cellular growth and death. What results is a cell that is essentially reprogrammed to speed up the process of death by spreading into areas of healthy tissue and then overpowering them by taking their space, blood, and nutrients. It is this kind of built-in programming that gives credence to the idea that a tumor inside the powerful brain of 11 could achieve some level of what appears to be sentience, when it is really just the continuation of this corrupted internal programming, allowed to play out on a large scale. Now, keeping that in mind, I found another parallel between cancer and the Mind Flayer, and that is preference for cold temperatures. We know that tumors in general will grow more quickly in a cold environment. It's also possible that tumors themselves may induce a cold stress in the surrounding area to promote their own survival within the host body, which then often affects the patient, causing them to seek out warmth. Cancer patients commonly report suffering deep chills, especially following their treatments, as if the cancer itself is fighting back. Now, in a laboratory environment, researchers placed healthy mice and mice with cancerous tumors into an enclosure which had a range of hot and cold sections. What the researchers found was that the mice with tumors preferred to stay in the warmest spot available, while the healthy mice would remain at the comfortable room temperature. Now, what's funny is, this is the opposite of the behavior that Will exhibited in Season 2. Will refused to go into the hot bath, and seemingly forced Joyce to keep the front door open so their house would remain freezing cold. The difference being that these lab mice were not being forced by a hive mind to remain in the cold to facilitate tumor growth. But in Season 2, Joyce uses Hopper's cabin to literally burn the Mind Flayer virus out of Will. And in real life, some small trials have shown that increasing the body temperature of cancer patients to a mild fever will improve the response rates of their radiation therapy. Now, don't get confused. I'm not saying that Will has cancer. What I'm saying is that the Mind Flayer is a manifestation of a cancerous tumor being telepathically broadcast from within 11's telepathic mind. And we know that 11 had been out in the cold for at least a month or two before Hopper found her in the time before Season 2. So it's possible that this period of time allowed for the tumor to increase in size. So if we had to define a brain tumor at this point, we could define it as an aggressive and unregulated growth, very much like a weed's growth, intent on breaking through boundaries, invading and taking over nearby areas, and it also has a notable dislike for hot temperatures. Sounds a lot like the Mind Flayer, doesn't it?
It's been spreading, growing beneath us like some cancer.
Now, the biggest thing that makes me think that 11 could have a brain tumor is all the talk of 11's wound. Season 2 goes on and on about this virus and how it's spreading, and then proceeds to use this same phrasing to discuss how 11's festering and rotting mental wound is spreading, and how she needs to overcome it or it will kill her. Now remember, it wasn't actually Dr. Brenner that told 11 she has this wound. It was one of 8's illusions, an interpretation of Dr. Brenner through 11's mind. This illusion should be based on 11's own fears too, but it's also based on an earlier conversation between 11 and 8.
But then that pain festered.
Festered?
You have to confront your pain. You have a wound, 11. A terrible wound. And it's festering.
It spread until finally I confronted my pain. And I began to heal.
And it will grow. spread.
Get out of my head.
And eventually, it will kill you.
Notice how those lines are not exactly the same? 8 mentions nothing about her pain possibly killing her. This additional line could just be 8 trying to shock 11 into fighting back and joining her cause, but I think it was intentionally slipped in by the writers for another purpose. Now, the pain alluded to in these scenes is obviously presented as emotional pain from past trauma, but I kind of see a double meaning here hiding in plain sight. This same scene is re-edited into the final showdown at the gate, and different clips are mixed in this time.
A terrible wound.
The gate. I opened it.
And it's festering. And it will grow. Spread. And eventually, it will kill you.
It creates a direct parallel between 11's wound and the spreading virus that is the Mind Flayer. And the only thing here that seems to be capable of actually killing 11 is the Mind Flayer. Doesn't it seem like 11's wound could be related to the Mind Flayer? Even if you want to say that this wound parallel relates to the gate and not the Demogorgon, the gate itself is a living thing, considered to be a part of the hive mind. Realizing this, the entire range of upside-down creatures could be associated with 11's wound, all spreading from one central point inside 11's brain. But if the Mind Flayer is just inside 11's brain, how could it produce actual flesh and blood creatures? I was going to say that these creatures could be a type of tulpa thought form, but because the Demodogs don't vanish after death, this is unlikely. But I found that on the list of psionic abilities, molecular manipulation is actually a subcategory of telekinesis, which allows for either the creation of new life from nothing or the biological manipulation of existing life forms. Oh, so that's where all the upside-down humans went. Because we know the Mind Flayer has highly developed psionic powers, it must possess this ability if it created or mutated the Demogorgon race. And if it has this power, 11 could unknowingly have it too, but is just unsure how to access it. And I would have to think that something operating on a cellular level would have a leg up in the molecular manipulation department.
It enslaves races of other dimensions by taking over their brains using its highly developed psionic powers.
If you consider this line about the Mind Flayer in the context of the brain tumor theory, then it also supports the idea that a tumor in 11's brain could have taken over the brains of people in a different dimension, eventually leading to the manipulation of their physical forms. Now, if this is possible, we have to consider the possibility that the Demogorgon from Season 1 could have been what remained of the upside-down version of 11, after the Mind Flayer took root in that dimension and corrupted the existing humans. Or it could be that the upside-down version of 11 acted like a conduit for the tumor in 11's brain, making her essentially patient zero in a hive mind manifestation outbreak. This outbreak would look very much like the scene when Will coughs up the dark mist, but on a much larger scale. Just imagine a parallel universe Jane, who managed to grow up with her mother, never actually kidnapped, and never actually renamed 11. Jane and Terry could have been outside playing in the yard on a sunny day, when Jane suddenly stops running and looks at Terry with concern, before she leans back and spews out the entire shadow monster, instantly filling the skies with darkness. Give me that flashback. Now I know what you're thinking. If 11's brain contains the source of the hive mind, why doesn't she spaz out like Will does whenever the upside-down creatures feel pain? Now, if this theory is true, there needs to be a disconnect between what the tumor actually is and what 11's powerful brain is allowing it to be. This same disconnect could explain why 11 was unharmed when she disintegrated the Demogorgon in Season 1. 11 is not currently infected with the Manifestations virus like Will was, so she experiences no shared pain. This is not to say that 11 would be unaffected if the Mind Flayer's shadow form managed to infect her. Now, this notion of confronting your pain, it makes me wonder if fighting the Mind Flayer manifestation in real life would actually reduce the size of the brain tumor in 11's head, or would it be an endless cycle of feeding it by fighting it? Perhaps the only way to stop it is to stop fighting it, and stop using her powers altogether. Or maybe something a little more drastic would be required. If 11 does have some kind of medical condition like a brain tumor, it's possible that Dr. Brenner knew about it all along. In the season 1 finale, Brenner picks up 11 and says,
You're sick, but I'm going to make you better. I'm going to take you back home, where I can make you well again, where we can make all of this better, so no one else gets hurt.
Why is she not well now? Is he just saying this because she's tired? Could this mean that she has an existing condition that Brenner had been keeping in check while he used her for his experiments? I also think that this line from season 1 could have been a quick nod to the fact that 11 actually has cancer.
Where's your hair? You have cancer?
Maybe 11 was in remission. It would create another reason for 11 to have short hair, even though it was likely kept short to aid in her brain scanning headgear. But if 11 does have a brain tumor, it could be in just the right place so it is not yet producing any of the familiar symptoms associated with brain tumors. So it'll be really interesting to see if season 3 begins with 11 dealing with severe headaches that she tries to hide from Hopper. So, in conclusion, what I think is that 11 has a brain tumor that is feeding on her powers, which has brought about the manifestation of the Mind Flayer, which then used molecular manipulation to create the upside-down creatures, and the virus-like behavior they exhibit perfectly mirrors the corrupted cellular programming of the cancer cells inside 11's brain, compelled to spread regardless of collateral damage. And because it doesn't know its true home, it doesn't know that it's currently trying to attack what is technically its home dimension, potentially risking its very existence. Now, this brings me to the end of part 1. And I'm sorry if this video was too dark for you. Some of my videos are really positive and inspiring, and some deal with darker subjects. But I don't believe 11 will ever actually die in this series. This would just be another hurdle for her to overcome. And protagonists who overcome incredible odds while dealing with a mortal wound are even more compelling to watch, in my opinion. If you enjoyed this video, please click the like button, and be sure to check out my next video featuring the second possibility in this theory, which is the Upside Down exists inside 11's mind. Believe it or not, there is actually a decent amount of evidence that points to this possibility. So much, in fact, that I couldn't even fit it all into this video. So if you want to see more, be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss my next video. Don't forget to check out my Stranger Things Season 2 review on planetcalvin.com, which is linked in the description. So tell me, what do you think of this theory? Do you think 11 could have a brain tumor that is repurposing her powers? Do you think 11's wound could be a hint to a brain tumor? What do you make of 8's illusion of Brenner? Does this "it will kill you" line hint to more than just emotional pain? And what do you make of the fact that neither 11 nor the Mind Flayer knew their true home? Could this indicate that they are both inside the same brain? Let me know in the comments below, and hit me up on Twitter at Planet Calvin. Let me know what you think. I'm really interested. Be sure to subscribe for more content like this, and thanks for watching.